Hey, good evening and warm welcome, friends. So here we are with the analysis of ExactCAT 5. So I will take you first through the DILR section, followed by Saurabh sir will take you through the quant section, and then Vijita ma'am will conclude it with the verbal section. So here I start with the first section, which is the DILR section. So even before we start, I think we are 1 week away from CAT, assuming everything would be intact. So in the sense all the things are upheld, there will not be any further delays. So assuming that once we are about a week from CAT. Good evening and warm welcome, friends. So here we are with CAT. Well, so considering that, a week to the exam, so some of you may be feeling a little nervous, some of you may be feeling a little anxious. Right now, all these feelings keep coming, and these might have either some positive effects or it could be negative effects. It will have a mixed effect on your exam preparation as well. So ensure that you stay on top of the subject, stay calm, maintain calm. Otherwise, you will also see that the performance swings in this particular week. So they're not, sometimes it may not be very positive swings. So provided you don't keep your cool. If you keep your cool, I'm sure most of you are well prepared. So whatever the resources that you have developed so far, the skill sets that you have developed so far would be good enough to take you good enough for you to perform well even in CAT or upcoming few more tests. Right. So idea is keep calm so that your selection skills will improve, your application skills will be better. If you don't keep calm, if you unnecessarily give room for excessive anxiety, excessive frustration, or excessive tiredness, whatever all these factors, right, tension, so whatever you call them, all these might have the detrimental effect on your preparation, especially in the last week. So let's be a little mindful about it. So if you are not little mindful about such factors, I'm sure you would have also messed up some of these tests in the recent past, right? But if you're mindful about it, I'm sure that your scores will be more in the range that you are expecting. So you would stay somewhere closer to the competition. So whatever kind of competition that you are expecting, let's keep these factors in mind. Okay, here we go. Let me take you through. Let me take you through the analysis part of this. So here we go. So I'll share the presentation maybe. Yeah, just give me a minute. Okay, here we go. Let me take you through this. So here was your first set where it's a Venn diagram for 4. Technically, this set was simply a Venn diagram for 4. Once anybody would have read this, you might have realized that this is nothing but Venn diagram for 4. So if you are familiar with Venn diagram for 4, you might have solved this particular set. But if you're unfamiliar with Venn diagram for 4, I'm sure this set might have troubled you sufficiently enough. Right, so it all boils down to, therefore, was I comfortable? Because anybody after reading this might have realized that it's a Venn diagram for 4. However, because all three out of 4 questions, or I guess yeah, 3 out of 4 questions on this were theta questions, the 3 theta questions that you could see. Because the nature of questions were theta questions, if I am the test taker, I might not have started with this particular question. Simple reason being, if I make a mistake somewhere in my comprehension, I know that because of that mistake, because it's like filling a Venn diagram, I might end up filling wrong. So if I have filled it wrong, I know that, okay, this will have an effect on 3 of my 4 questions. Might not be a great start. Whenever I'll let know, so most of the questions on a given set, so more than 2 questions, more than 50% of the questions in a given set do not are non-MCQs or theta questions. I generally don't want to start on that note, right now on that particular note, unless I'm super confident about what I'm doing, right? So I'm pretty familiar with these kind of sets. I'm very super confident about it. So unless unless I have that super confidence, I will not start with the theta question. Maybe I warm up myself. I'll ensure that, okay, I got some points for myself I got the reassurance from some questions, and then I will venture into the theta questions. Therefore, I would rather suggest like, this could be my second set. I might not take this as my first set. Probably I will take it at a later stage. Even if I'm very good at Venn diagram for 4, I might have taken at a later stage. But those who are not just comfortable with Venn diagram for 4, there is a bit of discomfort with respect to Venn diagram for 4, but they might not have done this at all because they're kind of not comfortable with the Venn diagram for 4, what region sits where, right? Now, it's a simple set. Technically, those who know the Venn diagram for 4, there was not much of challenge as well in this, just that the questions were theta questions. Therefore, it requires you to be extra cautious while filling the data. Thereby, you might not have taken this as your first set. So it might have taken, even when you decided to do it at a later stage or at the beginning, however, so it might have taken somewhere between 7 to 9 minutes based on how cautiously you are moving, knowing that there were theta questions out here. And there was one MCQ question there and 3 theta questions. That's a composition of this particular set. To do or not to do again depends upon how comfortable you are with Venn diagram for 4, because after reading at least you realize that the data is pretty simple, all in terms of percentage. So might have been solved, right? Yeah. So that's about the first set. Second one, then after this, when you are getting into the selections or when you are doing the things, you might have come across this particular set where there are 2 players playing certain game. The one who wipes out the all green circles, so that person becomes the winner. One who finishes becomes the kind of a winner of this particular game. So it was kind of a little bit of a, the good thing about this was what, there were only 7 circles, 1 to 7, there were only 7 circles. Therefore playing with 7 circles is much more easier, so at least you could have visualized that, right? So the task, always calibrate the magnitude of the task. 7 is different, 17 is different. Had I given the same game with 17, neither I would have done it nor you would have done it, unless we get a kind of a set pattern on this, right? So because it's only with 7 and with 2 questions being MCQ questions, in fact, all of them were MCQ questions. Yeah, all 3 questions being MCQ questions, you should have tried. I'm sure that even using the answer options, you might have got 2 of them. But again, so if I'm not familiar with this kind of game, I'm not familiar. Sure, you don't have to start with a note on an unfamiliar note, right? You don't want to start with an unfamiliar note, park it for a later stage. But at least one thing is certain, that this was not a difficult set, because the magnitude of work is pretty simple. Why? Because there were only 7 circles. There are not something like 15 circles. Therefore, the magnitude of the task is too much. The magnitude is less. If you could have visualized the magnitude of the task, I'm sure you might have done about 2 out of 3 questions here, right? So even at the later stage, even if you don't want to start with an unknown, so it's something like an unknown angel. Basically, it's an unknown angel. Sometimes known devils are better than unknown angels. Sure, therefore, sometimes even if it is a tedious set, we want to start with that particular set because we are pretty familiar with it. It's like attacking a known devil. That's fine. Known devil is any day better than unknown angel at times, right? So therefore, but it was an unknown angel. You could have realized at a later stage there is hardly any data to be read. So you might have come back to this particular set. I'm sure you might have solved 2 out of 3 questions out here, right? Even if you don't move a little cautiously. Oh, this kind of set came just about last week or last week. I'm sure some of you guys might have done very similar kind of set. There was a bit of reading time. Sure, the data was running from top to bottom. Well, there is enough scrolls that was required here, but data was not difficult to understand. It was easy to understand. Everything was explained with the example. See, some of us have the aversion for the size of data. Look, size does not matter. Once you read the data, what is the size of processing that matters. It is not size of the data itself does matter. No, because sometimes the data can be massive. It might look from it is going across 2 pages. But the point is, it's a very simple data. It's easy to comprehend. Once you comprehend that particular data, there is hardly anything to process. Sometimes the data could be dense. You got to read a lot in between the line, much more inferential in nature. See, that is what you always got to do. You should not go by the size of the data. You should go by always the magnitude of processing that has to be done using that particular data. All right, that is simple. Just like sometimes in your quant question, a simple remainder question has been asked, right? The remainder question looks like, okay, some x raised to power y divided by some divisor. So the point is, if you're unfamiliar with the divisor and x and y, see, question stem look just half a line. Half a line is also like, find the remainder when x raised to power y divided by d. Does a reading question takes time? No. But the point is, once you start solving that remainder question, if it is a pretty tedious one, right? By the time you apply the Chinese remainder theorem, etc., you would have sweat and spent about 4 minutes of your time at times. But what was the question length? It was just half liner. On the same hand, so there can be a time, speed, time and work question, which can be A working, this fellow working, might run 3-4 lines. But the point is, once you understand, there is hardly anything there. You are just talking about the efficiency, you might realize, and you may solve that much easily. Exactly same phenomena happens in the DI sets, and this was one of those sets. The data looked massive, looks discouraging, but trust me, the comprehension was so easy. You can read the data within no time, and I'm sure I'll know. So most of the questions, there were about 4 questions on this, 4 questions on this. 3 of them were just that plain and simple, could have done in no time. 3 out of 4 questions would have happened in no time. And you are also quite familiar with this kind of set. I'm sure this must have been taken as the first round set. All right, now in the first round, I'm not saying that this should be your first set. This should be a preferred set. When I say first round, I meant that hey, this should be one of the preferred set. Right, yeah. So this is one of those sets I expect that everybody could have done. Here come. All right, now here we come with another set where we are talking about some n number of people standing in a row, and then the sequence was explained. Odd number fellow attacks the even number fellow first, and then something on. I'm sure all right now. So even if it is not this again an unknown angel here. Some of you might have come across this logic before. Some of you might not have come across this logic before. If you have not come across this kind of logic before, it was an unknown angel, you might not discover it. But the point is, at least it is encouraging. There were only 3 sentences to be read before you go ahead and solve this particular puzzle. So reading 3 sentences is a piece already in an LR is a luxury. You'd have read just 3 sentences. So at least that was encouraging. Did I understand those 3 sentences? Had you just understood those 3 sentences, trust me guys, 2 questions you would have done in no time. Of course, the one of them might have taken some time, but the 2 questions, both the theta questions, 2 MCQ questions would have hardly taken any time. Maybe that one non-MCQ question, theta question, might have taken some time, or that was asking for the deeper understanding of this problem. Otherwise, the other 2 problems, or the other 2 questions, which are MCQ questions, were pretty superficial. If you have just understood those 3 sentences, and if you have kept your nerves, and if you have kept cool, I'm sure these 2 questions you could have done. So whether you come back and do it, or you want to take a risk because there were only 3 sentences that have done it, either ways, I see that one might have attempted this particular set. Right? Oh, this was a piece of cake. Right? So everybody, you all agree with me? This was Jared. Now this was a low-hanging fruit. It was just there. This was all the data about 2 sentences followed by 1 simple graph, and there were about 3 questions on this, and 2 of the questions were literally simple. Right? You all agree with me? This was a sitting duck to catch. Right? So 2 out of 3 questions. See, again, some people are like, once they understand the set, they want to do all 3 out of 3 questions. Not necessarily, friends. If you are not confident about one of those particular questions, or if you feel that one of the question is probing you much more deeper understanding of the given data, you can always leave that question and answer remaining 2-3 questions out of that. If there are 4 questions, 3 questions are connected, and you want to do those 3 questions, do it. Leave the other questions. All right, you don't have to get unnecessarily tired. You got to sustain the period of 120 minutes. You don't have to take up unnecessarily a tedious task and then get tired. Sure, if there is no other way than to take up such tedious tasks, don't unnecessarily take up the tedious task, because you know that every question has the same marks, or it has the same weightage. Right? There is no differential weightage out here. So therefore, 2 questions. Therefore, I always keep telling. So it's not that 4 out of 4 you should do. 3 out of 4 is a good bet. Sometimes 2 out of 3 is a good bet. So always keep moving, be fluid, keep moving from set to set, keep moving from question to question. Thereby, you would be able to do many more sets, and your accuracy is better. When you are doing 2 out of 3 questions, when you are handpicking those questions, your accuracy also would be better. Right, and your confidence also keeps building through that particular test, or during the test period. Okay, so that's about this set. So I know that okay, everybody should have done this in the first round. At least 2 out of 3 questions should have been done in the first round. Yeah. Right, and then here we come to the last set. Oh, this is a lot more inferential. So it looked pretty simple, but trust me, in this paper, by the time you come in here, this was not a simple set, for simple reason that the questions were non-MCQ questions. There were 2 theta questions out here, right? And 1 MCQ question is also not helping you much, and it was pretty much inferential. I'm not saying that this couldn't have been done. What I'm saying is this was not an easy set as it looked. looked simple, but there is a bit of number crunching involved here. There is a lot of in between. You have got to read between the lines, which was little tiring. While you read between the lines, if you miss out one particular point, so then you would have messed up this particular set. And out of 3 questions, 2 of the questions had no reconfirmation on what you are doing about. Only 1 question had certain amount of reconfirmation. Right. So therefore, all in all, if you look at this, there were 2 easy sets, which were actually the DI sets. There was a graph, there was some DI. So 2 sets were really easy, I should call. If you don't consider all questions, there were 3 questions each. But if you take 2 out of those 3 questions, I'm sure you would have done 4 out of those 6 questions on those 2 easy sets of DI within no time. So there were the 2 easy sets, and there were 2 medium sets, and there were 2 tedious sets. I don't consider them as difficult as well, but they were little lengthy because this set was little inferential in nature. All the time there was another set in the beginning. So these 2 sets, that's the Venn diagram for 4, provided you are not familiar. These 2 sets might have taken little more time. So that is the analysis of this particular paper. I'm sure if you learn to keep your nerves cool, if you stay calm through the exam, through the period of the test, you would be able to pick up your battles and you will be able to process them. You'll be able to attack those questions. But if you're already agitated, even before you get into the test, trust me, the test is going to override you. So therefore, let's be mindful about it. In the last 1 week, especially, you are going to write a few more tests in the last 1 week. Learn to keep nerves cool. Focus more on selection. Don't read 1 set and decide. Read at least about 3 sets. So you are expecting about 6 sets to be there, 5 or 6 sets to be there. Read 3 of them and then decide where you want to start. Always start on a note, start on a very familiar note. Even if it is a tedious one, shouldn't matter. Start with a familiar note. So that builds the confidence. Then you can attack even the unknown angels, questions of the type unknown angels. Great. Okay, here we go. All right, now this should be the analysis of this particular section. So these are the kind of marks that we are talking about, right? About 100 percentile should be about 43 marks because it was not an easy paper. So because you got to do a lot more sets, you want to attempt these 16 questions, right? So therefore, 100 percentile was as low as about just 43 marks. If you look at 98 percentile, which is supposed to be one of the good scores, 98 percentile was just around 26 questions, which means anybody done about 3 sets with about 3 questions each. 3 sets might have given you about these 10 questions. There were 6 sets. Out of 6 sets, even if you have done those 2 easy sets and 2 moderate sets, or 2 easy sets, and even if 1 moderate set might have given you those 10 questions. See, that was the task. That was the asking. Just about 3 out of 6 sets was the asking. But trust me, you have got to actually get your 10 to 11 questions right using 4 sets. That was the right strategy because you were not able to close every single question in that particular set. So if you are looking at 80 percentile, which is the cutoff for most of the B schools, around 80-85 percentile. So that was just about 7 questions. Trust me, that 7 questions again is about 3 sets, right? You don't get 7 questions from 2 straight sets. You got to all it now, so move around 3 sets again to get your 7, get your 7 questions right, 7 attempts right. Okay, so that's the understanding about exact CAT 5 DILR section. I would hand it over to Saurabh sir for the quant analysis. Sir, all yours.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I'll take over for the quant part. Yes.
Saurabh sir, you are not audible. You are muted.
Am I not audible? Am I not audible? Hello?
Saurabh sir, you have to unmute.
I have unmuted.
Presentation is visible, sir, but you are not audible.
Yet not?
Yes, you are audible to me, sir.
Okay. I think that should be fine. I am audible.
Fine, you're fine. Fine, sir. Fine. Audible.
Okay, everybody. So, hello, friends. I think that was a good, interesting thing that you learned about the DI part. Hello. Last week left to get 1 week.
Sir, you are audible. Please go on, sir. Please go on.
So this is the last week. Maybe you've already gone through some of the NMAT tests. Maybe all of you might have gone through some of them. So you've seen the actual CAT like an exam. You've gone through NMAT. Anyway, for those who have not gone through any tests yet, this will be your first. Maybe just a little bit of nervousness, but that should be fine. One more week, a few more OMCs, and you will be through. This was the exact mock 5, exact 5. Just 20 questions in the paper. So on an average, you have 3 minutes per question to look at the question, to analyze whether to leave it or not. On an average, you still have 3 minutes per question. This was fairly moderate in that time consumption level. However, there were a few difficult questions or time consuming questions. Although there were just 20 questions, it was fairly spread out, except for the chapter numbers. There was a small bias towards numbers, and there was a large number of questions from one chapter numbers. Let's see the part. We'll first see the topic distribution. Then we'll go on to the question mapping type, easy, moderate, difficult, and then the number of attempts that could have been happening. First, as I said, numbers. There were 5 questions out of the 20 questions. That makes it 25% of the paper from one chapter. Otherwise, it was a fairly distributed paper. In spite of just being 20 questions, there are from 12 different topics, 12 chapters. Okay. 5 from numbers, permutation, combination, profit loss, quadratic equation, and TSD. So 2 questions from these 4 chapters. 2 from geometry, 1 from circle and 1 from polygons. Otherwise, you had functions, probability, 1 more, probability, progressions, 1, ratio proportion. Now, some people would wonder why this ratio proportion, but we'll discuss a little later. And there was 1 question on time and work. Let's see the number of easy, moderate questions. Out of the 20, 6 questions were easy. 6 were easy. 8 moderate. That makes it 14 out of 20. 70% was doable. 70% of the paper was manageable very well. There were 6 difficult or time-consuming questions. 6 of them. Maybe new topics. Maybe some of you would be familiar with few of them. But in general, they would be considered difficult or time-consuming. And luckily, we had not very difficult question this time again. Of the 6 easy, 1 was on profit and loss. A very direct question. Profit percentage is given, discount percentage is given, and we had to find the markup percentage. Absolute classroom type of a question. Another similar classroom type question was from numbers. Number of factors of 3 raised to 2, 5 raised to 4, 6 raised to 5. The only catch here was 6 raised to 5. Somebody would forget that it should have been a prime number. That was the only catch. Otherwise, it was a very easy question. Another question on numbers was stalls at the Food Fest of IIM Ahmedabad. Stalls were arranged in the sort of a pentagonal way, and number of stalls were given. And the only catch here was that the person was going around alternate stalls, and he had gone around 4 times. 4 made it a little difficult. Maybe people would think of it as 4, but that was not important. Going around twice, and he would just, if you understand, there were odd number of stalls. If he makes 2 rounds, he would be visiting every shop, every stall, and all you are supposed to do is sigma n. So it was an easy question. 1 question from quadratic equations. The expression is given, and you have to find the maximum value of the expression. Classroom type of question. Classroom type question. Something absolutely easy, maybe done in very fast, very fast. A question again on circles, classroom type question. 2 parallel chords are there, distance between them is there, and you have to find the radius of the circle. Again, the numbers were such that you could have even avoided theory. A shortcut was also possible here. So a very easy question here. Time and work. Again, probably this was one of your exercise questions directly put there, just to see how you do there. Probably just maybe numbers might have been changed or even numbers were not changed. Outlet pipe can empty in 8 hours. With the inlet, due to the inlet pouring in, it took 8 hours to finish empty the tank. Inlet speed is given, and then there's a question. So quite an easy question here. All these 6 questions were absolutely easy. Moderate, there were 8 questions. Although some of them have been put up as moderate, if you can catch up those small hints in the question, some of these were easy actually. Profit and loss. 100 brokers in between the buyer and the seller. Each has a 10% profit. You are asked a very simple question. Savings by avoiding the last broker. So you don't need to worry about all the 100. You just need to worry about the last broker. So if that is understood, this was an easier question. It was just a little bit lengthy in reading. That's why it's a moderate question. One question on quadratic equations. What is the ratio of the roots? The only catch was, hint here was if a plus b plus c is 0, then what is it? So if you knew what happens if a plus b plus c is 0, then this was easy. Otherwise, maybe you would bifurcate split the middle term, find the roots, and then find the ratio. Even in that case, it was moderate, not very lengthy, quite a moderate question. One question from permutation combination, interesting one. There have been classroom questions like this. Identical fruits and distinct chocolates. Melons, mangoes, some identical fruits are there. And then there are distinct chocolates, 4 types, 4 distinct chocolates. 3 questions within the main question. You are supposed to select without any restriction at least one and at least one of each type. The only catch here was one of the options, the 4th option was none of these. So maybe you would have to calculate all the 3 answers. In that case, otherwise it will be dangerous enough to answer. Even if you calculate for any one of them, maybe you would have got the answer. But just because of none of these, maybe you will have to calculate all the 3 values. Probability was quite easy, except for the fact that there was a without replacement question. 4 slips, 4 friends, they have to pick up who has the highest probability of winning. So easy question, just one small adaptation if you could adapt without replacement. Even if you actually tried out calculating everybody's probability, it would be quite worth it within the exam. We talked about 3 minutes on an average 3 minutes per question. So this was something, even if you tried out, actually, it would work out within 2 to 2.5 minutes, worth it. There are 4 more moderate questions, one from progressions. 7 geometric means between the first and the last, which is the 5th mean, geometric mean. Maybe the geometric mean definition might confuse you. That's the only catch, otherwise easy question. Functions and graphs, there was a graph here. The graph of modulus of log mod x. How many times does it interact with x-axis? So quite a moderate question if you have gone through the graphs of log x and mod log x. Time speed distance question here was a little tricky. Easy enough, but tricky. Because there were 3 different types of races. A and B run a 100-meter race, B and C run a 200-meter race. What will happen in a 300-meter race between A and C? So quite an ordinary question. The only thing was A and B were beating not by meters, but by time. A beat B by 15 seconds, B beat C by 15 seconds. Now A will beat C by how many seconds? That was the only thing. It was not in meters, it was in time. A question on polygons. A rectangular polygon. Maybe if you had gone through your marathons very well, you would have known this, what is a regular polygon, rectangular polygon, and you would have known the relation between the reflex angle, the 270-degree angles and the right angles. Otherwise, this was difficult. If you did not know that, this was difficult. There's no way you might be able to calculate within an exam. Otherwise, a direct question which you should have remembered. Okay, the difficult question now. 6 difficult questions, or sometimes not difficult but time consuming questions. 8 sweets per box and 5 sweets per box, the largest number which cannot be tapped. Usually what we refer to this as the chicken McNugget problem. Maybe if you have heard of it, this would be easy. Direct equation. If you've not heard of it, you don't know what you're doing. Then this is difficult. What is to be done, how it is to be approached, maybe you don't know. So difficult if you have not heard of that. Drawing lines, numbers, one more chapter, a father, 2 questions, 10th and 11th, if you remember. Drawing lines on a plot. A father has a lot of property. He used to distribute his property. There are 8 sons. So they are supposed to draw lines on the plot. So they decide how to draw. It's a question of even the puzzle was intellectual based. So here again, you should have known that the drawing of lines for maximum number of plots should be 1 plus sigma n. Fairly, almost a lot of people would know that. So the 10th was a little moderate. 11th one, which was about unbounded regions, was a little difficult. So 2 questions of numbers or miscellaneous questions that way. What I have called the ratio proportion variation question is actually a polynomial question. It appears to be a polynomial question. A polynomial is given and on the right hand side you had values. But if you had applied componendo dividendo, it would have been solved very fast, very fast. If you had cross multiplied to solve it like a polynomial, it would take a lot of time. You would have left it. But if you had just done it like componendo dividendo, it would be easy. That is why even the solution will tell you the same thing. So that is why I'm putting it as a ratio proportion and variation question, more of this than a polynomial question. One question on time speed distance was the mountain and a dog. A person going up the mountain, he has a dog. What was the total distance traveled by the dog? Again, situation based. If you have known the situation, easy, otherwise calculative. One more question was the last permutation combination, Jennifer Lopez. 51 identical pieces of the cake and 3 persons were to be distributed. The only case problem was that they should all get distinct values. So not very calculative. For the total, you could have done direct equation and then seen how many cases are there where 2 people might become identical, 2 or more, and eliminate those. So indirect calculation could have been done and quite okay. It was a time consuming question. Yes, this was time consuming, more of time consuming than difficult. So that was the mapping of the questions, the 20 questions that we saw. Let's see the good attempts. Okay, none of course was very difficult. There were 6 easy questions, 8 moderate and 6 time consuming or difficult. All the 6 and 8 easy and moderate questions should have been done. All the 14. Maybe 1 out of the difficult ones. 14 questions within 40 minutes was quite okay. I think I gave a wrong number by saying average. It was still the 60-minute pattern in my mind. 40 minutes, 20 questions, 2 minutes on an average. 14 questions within 40 minutes is fairly good, fairly good. And there would be enough time to probably do 1 more difficult question, maybe a difficult or a lengthy question. So 15 would have been a good attempt for 98 percentile. Fifteen attempts, 80 to 85% accuracy, maybe. So somewhere maybe we could have made just 2 errors. That would be still acceptable. 13 correct, 2 wrong would give you a score very close to 38. Maybe one of those wrong could have been a key in type of an answer, type in the answer. So I'm taking 1 negative and 3 marks. So 38 would have been a fairly good score for 98 percentile. 98 percentile could have been achieved with a score of 38. 100 would require a little more, 48 marks. 48 is again just 16, I'm saying. For a 100 percentiler, 16 attempts would not be difficult. Excuse me. But all those 16 then should have been correct. One error and you are at 99 percentile. 95 would have been achieved at 33, a score of 33, with 90 being achieved at 29 marks. 26 could give you somewhere around 80 percentile. So that was what will be the percentile and score mapping. I would now request Vijita madam to take up the verbal section.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a discussion of the VA sectional. So a fewer number of questions, like the other sectionals. You found fewer questions this time in the sectional. 22 questions is not a big deal for people who've been accustomed to 28 by now, right? 28 questions in quite a few papers, 25 in many others. So 22 is definitely something manageable. But when you come to think of it, it wasn't such smooth sailing after all. Let's look at what were the various questions. 22 questions, 40 minutes, 14 questions of RC, 2 RCs with 4 questions each, and 2 RCs with 3 questions each. So 4 RCs, which is reading intensive, 4 RCs to be done here. Though you have fewer questions, there is still a lot of reading to be done. Plus 2 summary questions, again reading, parajumble, 3 parajumbles, and 3 out of context. So when you think of the kind of reading that you've got to do, particularly some of these passages were not very straightforward and not very easy reading, which is why this entire sectional is definitely not an easy one, will be termed moderate to difficult, maybe with a bit of leaning towards difficult. So if you found a couple of RCs tough, if your accuracy has been hit here, yes, it was bound to happen, because yes, some of the RCs and some of the questions were a little tricky, right? Let's look at the details. So our first RC, anthropology, anthropological research into the collapse of civilizations. Getting the main idea is not so difficult, but you'll probably have faced some challenge in some questions because of the fineness of this passage, because of the fine ideas that it's talking about. So the length also, is roughly around 500 words, we can say. Primary purpose question, that was an easier one, doable, but there were 2 inferences that were really challenging, because you could very well be caught with another option. I'm sure you found this tricky. So considering that at least 2 questions here are marked difficult, one is weaken. Weaken is normally a moderate question type, because there is a method to it. You just have to look at a certain way in which you look for a detail and mark the correct answer. So the question per se has a very nice structured approach. But if you don't know that structured approach, a question like weakening the argument can be very challenging, right? So it's actually moderate, but for people who find weakening questions a little confusing, then yes, the question is tough, which means you have 3 questions that are difficult, and the topic in itself is not a very, very direct one. So not so easy after all. Second, international politics. You're talking about immigrants and free speech and all this debate around free speech. On the lines of it, on the surface of it, it looks like a fairly direct passage. Something contemporary, jo ho raha hai aajkal, right? There are also those names mentioned. We're familiar with these names, etc. But then when it again comes to the questions, you'll find that they're extremely tricky. So all 3 questions, the inference, the logical structure, the main idea related, very close. Definitely a passage that you don't want to invest your time in, 400 odd words, for just 3 questions and difficult ones. There are very high chances that any of you go, so it's very luring. It tempts you. It makes you read the passage by the very topic of it. आपको लगता है कि ये तो contemporary current affairs है, मुझे ये पता है, and therefore let me read this. but then you really get stuck here. It ends up taking a lot of your time. So definitely not something I would choose. Next, economics. You're talking of social class here, the changing patterns of social mobility, how property ownership has again come to be associated with a movement in social class, etc. So not so very straightforward, not very, very direct. And, to read about a 400 odd words for just 3 questions on a slightly heavy topic again, not a very pleasant thing, certainly not a pleasant thing. And to think that, yes, there's at least that one difficult question, 2 moderate ones. So we've looked at 3 passages. The first one looked a little difficult. The second one, definitely challenging. The third one, partially challenging. So what do we choose? Yes, our first choice should have been RC4, the mythology one. Pretty straightforward, something that we know, something that we understand. And also the multiple interpretations of the Mahabharata, what it stands for, etc. That's also common knowledge. We've read a lot about it. So something, though, yes, the passage is a little lengthier, the language is light, the ideas are familiar to us, and therefore it makes for fairly easy one. And the best part is that you also have easy questions. So definitely a passage I would take. Now, between the first and the third one, maybe the third passage, that which has to do with economics, changing patterns of social mobility, is a better bet. Though, yes, we are only looking at 3 questions. So now I take this one maybe, and then I'm stuck. I have just 7 questions that I've taken, attempted in these 2 passages, and reading 2 passages for a mere 7 questions. That's the trickiness of this. Look at this, fewer questions, but more work to be done for, the results are not huge, right? You read a lengthy passage, but you have just 3 questions to take. So all of that is a bit of, that's what causes you the trouble in this particular mock. So maybe the second one, maybe the third one, certainly not the second one. Perhaps I might do a quick reading of the first passage and try and take something here. So 1, 3, and 4. I only have 4 passages here. And then I'm left with the various other BA questions. I have to get into this. And if I chose to get into this, that would turn out to be a lucky thing for me, because they're not really very difficult. You'll find that the language is fairly easy. The, parajumbles, you have at least 2 parajumbles that are moderate. One is difficult. In fact, you have 1 difficult in every question type. So that means that you have at least, 4 or 5 questions to look at. So 5 taken here, another, those 3 RCs taken, maybe a few questions left out of them. So it's not a lot of choice here, and every question becomes very, very important, because when you have fewer questions, you know that every question becomes a huge jump in percentiles. So what does the bigger picture look like of this sectional? 1 easy question, 12 moderate questions, 9 difficult ones. So a total of 22, 9 difficult questions. That's a big chunk. So what's the expectation? At least these 13 questions to be taken, maybe 1 or 2 from the difficult ones to be taken. So roughly at about 15 questions at 80 plus % accuracy, ends up giving you a score of 35. So look at the come down here. Your 98 percentile is at a score of 35. Your 99 percentile is at a score of 40. Remember that, that really big jump here, just maybe 2 more questions. Your 100 percentile is a 50 plus. 32, a score of 32, that's just about 1 question less than 98, would fetch you a 95 percentile. 29, a total score of 29 fetches you a 90 percentile, and a total score of 26 fetches you an 80 percentile. Because let's face it, it's not very difficult for me to, try and figure out 11 questions or so at an 80% accuracy and manage this 80 percentile. That's not very, very challenging. So this is what the verbal sectional looks like. Let's put all this together and see what the big picture here is. So a total score of 15 fetches you an overall 80 percentile, sorry, 51, sorry. A total score of 51 fetches you an overall 80 percentile. A total score of 62 with a sectional score of 20 in DILR, 29 in QA, and a 29 in VARC fetches you a 90 percentile. A total score of 74 with a 23 in DILR, a 33 in QA, a 32 in VARC fetches you a 95 percentile. A total score of 92 with 26 in DILR, 38 in QA, 35 in VARC fetches you a 98 percentile. A total score of 99, just a 99 with a 30 in DILR, a 45 in QA, a 40 in VARC fetches you a 99 percentile. A total score of 138 with a 43 in DILR, a 48 in QA, 50 in VARC fetches you that lovely 100 percentile. So a very different paper for a change, close to CAT 19, at least the verbal was CAT 2019 morning slot, close to that. I hope you had a good experience with this. All right. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Thank you, everyone. Take care and keep studying.